Howdy, Bearded Bristol back again with another video. That's right. I have been diving into my bookshelf because there are a great many books up there that I have not yet read. But now I have started a new one. Well, a new to me book that is back from 1859, titled On Liberty by John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill, like I said, 1859. Great Britain philosopher, big-time free speech, individual liberty advocate, even though he was not in the United States, operating under the British monarchy and whatnot, but still advocated free speech. How about that? What a novel concept these days. Anyway, it got me to thinking a great deal about social media censorship. That's right. I'm sure we've all seen it. We know we've heard about it as President Trump's account, was suspended a time or two, or maybe 20, I'm not even sure anymore. Tweets banned, not just the president, by the way, but accounts suspended, tweets banned, shadow banning, doxing, all of those wonderful things that go along with this infantile platforming of social media. For all of the benefits that it could provide, we seem to focus most generously on those negative aspects. So why not do it again right now? If you notice the glare here in these eye goggles, it's because I actually typed up some information, in particular some quotes from Mill, as well as a more contemporary to us criticism of Mill's work. So I'm going to jump right in here and hang out with me for a little bit and do some deep thinking about what's about to go on and what is actually going on in society these days. Society can and does execute its own mandates, and if it issues wrong mandates instead of right, or any mandates at all in things in which it ought not to meddle, it practices a social tyranny more formidable than many kinds of political oppression. It leaves fewer means of escape, penetrating much more deeply into the details of life and enslaving the soul itself. How about that? That's from 1859. So Mill was either way, way ahead of his time, or this ain't the first time we've seen this kind of behavior. It's just the first time that it has encompassed maybe an entire country and or world and can be so widespread and so oppressive at the same time. Gonna follow up with one more Mill quote here. If all mankind minus one were of one opinion, and only one person were of the contrary opinion, mankind would be no more justified in silencing that one person than if he had the power would be justified in silencing mankind. But the peculiar evil of silencing the expression of opinion is that it is robbing the human race. Mill goes on to say that in order to formulate correct opinions and find the truth, essentially good versus evil, fact versus fiction have to do battle in a world of ideas. And those debates have to be had to settle what is actually real versus what is actually not real. Propaganda, we hear all of the words to describe fake news or what have you. That said, so as not to be myopic on the subject, I also looked up some criticisms of Mill's work, and there are several out there, ranging over the last, 150 years or so. That said, I focused on one in particular that was written in 2018, I believe, and it was an excerpt from a book. It was published in the Boston Review, the excerpt was, of a book written by Mr. Jason Stanley, and the title of that book is How Fascism Works. When I started reading the article, it did not immediately trigger, but as I got deeper into it, I did recall when this book was written. I have not read the entire book, so I apologize if anything's taken out of context, but if the Boston Review felt it suitable for reprint in a small article, then I feel it's suitable to cherry pick some quotes here that take to task Mr. Mill for his opinion. But I'm going to start off with this one, which is fascist politics seeks to undermine trust in the press and universities. Uh, Mr. Mill is using kind of a classic definition of fascism, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what we would all reference if we were writing a paper. But what he does not take into account is the potential in this situation for the press and the universities to be in the hip pocket of the state, in which case that changes everything within the definition of fascism. Um, and I would argue, particularly, that both of those things are kind of in the hip pocket of the state. If you are a traditional government uh, person, elected official, the media will be kinder to you than someone from the outside. But additionally, we've all heard the stories of very liberal ideas coming out of universities, which they are supposed to, but they also should be balanced with critical thinking, and I think that that has gone by the wayside. I'm not going to dive into that in this particular video, but maybe someday. I'm a big fan of, I don't know, critical thinking and common sense. But that said, his support here is that fascist politics seeks to undermine trust in press and the universities. Okay, so he goes after then President Donald Trump as being a fascistic type of person or type of leader, in that he was going hard after the press and the media. Nobody can argue that, nor would they, be successful if they did. But, like I say, that supposes that those entities are still operating on the will of the greater good or on the behalf of people, and not on the behalf of a much larger state. He also throws out there that in another kind of propagandistic twisted meaning, politicians can convey the message that they are the representative of the common good by explicitly attacking the common good. This is a great quote, again, but it just depends on which shoe, which foot the shoe is on. You could very easily argue this comment either way, but because he has set it up with Trump is a fascist because he went after media and the universities, then all of a sudden that view has to support his claims. Now, on the other hand, you could easily argue the very same thing from a conservative standpoint, that the common good is being squashed by large tech companies. Parler has been shut down, which I could take or leave Parler, honestly. I spent some time on there. There is an awful lot of misleading and misguided information on there, but it is unique information nonetheless. And I would say there was probably as much fact on Parler as there was fiction. See Facebook, see Twitter, for God's sake. There is so much misleading information out there on any social media platform. But Parler was shut down because it was dangerous. Well, who decides what the common good actually is? Shouldn't that be the public debate? But we can't have that public debate because some of the best debaters are being shut down, silenced, shadow banned, deplatformed, demonetized. There are so many D's that can come after you in the social media sphere that it's a little bit scary. I obviously put some content out there, but I'm a minor leaguer. Heck, I'm not even a minor leaguer. I haven't even made it to tryouts yet. But there are legitimate voices out there that do their research, that know what they're talking about, and have very well formulated, thought out, and researched opinions, and they are not being allowed to express themselves. So isn't that robbing, from the common good if those perspectives aren't allowed to be heard. And when I say perspectives, a great many of them tend to be very historic in nature, in that they are constitutional based opinions. These are opinions that would, the framers of the Constitution would likely agree upon. But in the name of the common good, we keep drifting farther and farther away from what the framers of the Constitution intended. And you'll hear the argument that the Constitution is a living document and all of that nonsense. We can have that debate too, another time. But when you have people that have expressed knowledge in the Constitution and the founding of the country, and their opinions are being silenced because they are harmful, well, who are they harmful to exactly? We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings anymore, and we dare not ask people to think. That's maybe the most disappointing of all of this, is that if the ideas of the people who were slamming the doors were so great, they would not have to slam those doors, because people gravitate towards the truth. As much as we love outlandish conspiracy theories, and some will never abandon those. That's why we still have a flat earth society out there, for God's sake. You could take a flat earther up in a spaceship and show them the earth from a distance, and they are likely not going to change their mind. So that segment of the population still exists. That just their opinions are their opinions, and they are not going to change no matter how much fact they are confronted with. But then there's a much greater part of the population that is capable of critical thinking if they can get out of their own internal biases. But one of the ways to do that is to actually speak the truth to those people. And when the truth, or when an opinion that could be the truth, is being silenced and removed from social media, or at least made very difficult to find on social media, you are eliminating the opportunity for that lively debate that Mill talks about. It's interesting because, again, in this Stanley excerpt, it says, disagreement requires a shared set of presuppositions about the world. Even dueling requires agreement about the rules. And he's right. If you want to have a philosophical discussion, you have to agree on the premise, or the premises, in order to have that legitimate type of debate. Now, that said, I would argue very simply that we thought we understood the rules prior to deplatforming, prior to fact-checking, prior to all of these do-gooders that are silencing opinions that might hurt somebody's feelings, or, heaven forbid, make them think. We thought we understood the rules. There's policies out there in very fine print, and for a long time there were some conservative entities that were allowed to continue by obeying those rules, even if they were warned from time to time or whatever over really nonsensical type of violations. But they were allowed to exist for a time prior to being silenced, and or near silence, muffled. How's that? Muffled? I like muffled. Throttled is the official word I suppose you would use, but muffled sounds better to me tonight. Nevertheless, the rules were published. The rules existed. They were there. All we had to do was read and follow them, and they were. But that's not good enough anymore. The Jack Dorseys of the world believe that the common good is what they believe the common good to be. And there is no debate beyond that. And you could very easily, not to derail the conversation, look at the global warming conversation or conversations over COVID-19. COVID-19 is certainly not a hoax. But there are legitimate questions about the number of actual deaths related to COVID-19 as well as the overall number of cases. There are legitimate questions about why some preventative measures weren't taken. How, Governor Cuomo in New York can still get away with looking like a hero even though a ridiculous percentage of the senior population in nursing homes died under his watch. Uh, but you aren't allowed to ask those questions. You aren't allowed to raise those arguments anymore. So the dueling that was to have taken place was done between somebody with a howitzer and an opponent with one arm tied behind his back and a six-shooter. So it's really unfair now at this point. And again, this was written in 2018. Some of these things were not surfacing yet at that point. So I'm not trying to bash Jason Stanley necessarily. However, I do think that the argument that he presents against Mills believing that all opinions should be heard, it makes a great contrast to the situation we're looking at currently today. And I'll read you one final quote from Stanley before I start to tie this all back together and wrap it up for the evening. If the society is divided, however, then a demagogic my goodness, those are big words for a Saturday night. If the society is divided, however, then a demagogic politician can exploit the division by using language to sow fear, accentuate prejudice, and call for revenge against members of hated groups. Attempting to counter such rhetoric with reason is akin to using a pamphlet against a pistol. I just raised the howitzer versus revolver. He says very much the same thing here, except again, close your eyes and pick a side, because you could easily read that both ways. All the more reason that the debate should be opened up about who gets to control the common good. And the truth is, the common good is not something that should be controlled, but that's what we're witnessing. We are literally changing the meaning of science in terms of the number of biological genders and sexes. We are changing the rules of science when it comes to global warming, when it comes to masks usage and their effectiveness, vaccines and their effectiveness. We aren't having an honest debate. We are being told what we are to believe to be the truth, and we are also then told that we have to accept that. And that's not how a healthy society functions. A healthy society functions through debate, through an actual free press that does speak the truth and does not involve itself in emotion. And I've done videos about what the press does to elicit feelings and to change public opinion. And the reality of the matter is, what the press should be doing is just reading us the facts. Investigative journalism, by and large, is dead, and it's unfortunate because journalists can inject opinion and make it sound a little bit like fact, but you got to pick up on those words, and all of a sudden, public opinion begins to sway. And that is not necessarily for the common good. It's good for somebody, generally speaking, the elitists. And whether you agree or disagree with me, you ought to know who the elitists are based on the conservative definitions in, talk radio, Fox News, pick your poison, as it were. But there's also a wonderful meme, in my opinion, out there that says, essentially, if you agree with the celebrities and the athletes and the journalists, you are not part of the resistance. And this is not a civil war, and it doesn't have to even be a battle, but we have to open up the lines of communication, and we've got to stop shutting down opinions that we don't like. We need to hear those opinions, and we need to battle them with our own opinions or with fact. And the idea that we'll just shut off an entire segment of the population, um, from a social media standpoint. And some of those folks are very smart. Whether you agree with them or not, they can make a very compelling argument if they're allowed to make it. So a good chance for all of us to do some inner searching about social media, our habits, our expectations, and why is it we don't want to hear others' opinions, our facts from other people that we disagree with. Uh, I admit when I was on Facebook, I exercised a certain amount of censorship myself because I was largely on Facebook for happy pictures and things like that. But I did have lively debates, and I did moderate those debates, and I did make sure that they were I shouldn't say honest, but that they were polite, and that people treated others with respect. And you can still engage in those discussions um, without cussing, without denigrating, without making others feel stupid. And maybe you do hurt a feeling or two now and then if you happen to, break the barriers and change someone's opinion. Nevertheless, the time is here for us to make that conscious choice. Do we want a free exchange of ideas, all ideas, uh, or do we want to be told what to believe because it's easy and it's comfortable? If we don't have to see those things, then we don't have to think critically about them. And my God, I don't want to think critically because, ow, my head. Obviously, some last minute sarcasm there as I wrap this up. What the heck do I know? I'm just the maintenance guy. So I'm going to have a little more scotch and call it a Saturday night. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to heck it makes you think, because there's an awful lot to think about these days. Y'all have a great night. We'll talk to you again soon.